The much anticipated vote on healthcare reform has been postponed.
Tonight, the impact of the GOP's healthcare plan and what people are saying about the proposed changes. See It Live starts now. Time is running out for President Trump to keep one of his biggest campaign promises, replacing Obamacare. Good evening, I'm Madison Weil.
And I'm Mark Salinger. The House is planning to hold a vote on health care tomorrow as Republicans spend the night working to gain enough votes to secure its passage.
A chance to change what we see as one of the most devastating pieces of legislation to the economy, to the health care system, and quite honestly, to the standing of America as the greatest country in the world.
This is awful. This is unacceptable. This is a life or death issue for many in this country. Health care is very, very personal. Don't take it away from people. Let's work in a bipartisan way to make the improvements in the Affordable Care Act that we all know need to be made.
Not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule
After
20,
24 hours of tense negotiations, White House officials and House Speaker Paul Ryan announced they are finished with negotiations. Late today, President Donald Trump threatened to leave Obamacare in place if tomorrow's vote fails.
The healthcare debate has big political implications for both Republicans and Democrats. I asked Director of the USC Unruh Institute of Politics, Bob Schrum, about how the repeal and replacement of Obamacare could affect the Washington political world.
He's caught between the so-called moderates in the Republican Party who don't want all of the protections of Obamacare to go away, and the so-called House Freedom Caucus, which is ultra-conservative and basically wants to remove all of the reform measures. I think it's possible they get it through the House. I'm very skeptical they can get it through the Senate. I think the Senate will create, if it passes anything, will create a much different version of the bill, which preserves a lot of the protections of Obamacare.
Now, Schrum also said that much of the blame for House Republicans not being able to pass the bill should fall on the White House, who he says underestimated how hard it would be to enact the legislation. Now, hundreds of Obamacare supporters gathered in downtown Los Angeles today to protest President Trump's attempts to repeal the Affordable Care Act.
Curly Thomas.
And more patients began to see nurse practitioners.
Planned Parenthood supporters marched along Temple Avenue to the Edward Roybal Federal Building. Organizers of the protest say the new bill would discriminate against minorities, taking away access from unprivileged communities.
We know our rights, we can come out and fight, and it's important because our family members, our children, everyone that needs these services will be affected, and that's why we're out here. We're trying to bring everybody out, unite them, one of all colors, and win.
You know, this bill not only is going to repeal in a terrible way the Affordable Care Act, but it's going to defund Planned Parenthood, which really is all that's going to do is remove access for the most vulnerable all across the country, here in Los Angeles.
President Trump's proposed plan for health care, what some are now calling Trump Care, is very different from Obama's Affordable Care Act. Let's do a side-by-side comparison of some key healthcare aspects. How does Trump Care stack up against Obamacare? Individual mandate. This is the first major difference between the two policies. Under Obamacare, all eligible citizens are required to have health insurance. Under Trump Care, this is not the case. Now let's look at treatment for people with pre-existing conditions. Under Obamacare, people with pre-existing conditions cannot be denied coverage or charged higher insurance rates. Trump actually agrees that people with pre-existing conditions should not be denied coverage, but they might be charged more under the GOP plan. We can also expect some changes in where we get our prescription drugs. Trump has proposed to allow Americans to buy prescription drugs from foreign countries, something he believes will lower costs. In looking at Medicaid funding, Trump has proposed reducing federal money given to states for Medicaid. The two plans also differ in price transparency, cost assistance, and tax deductions, among other things.
Now, one group who will be affected by Trump's healthcare proposal is Planned Parenthood. Annenberg Media's JT Arce is live outside the Planned Parenthood on West 30th Street with more on the possible effects of Trump's healthcare bill. JT.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So with Trump Care's new healthcare proposal, Planned Parenthood and the 2.8 million patients that they serve yearly stand to lose a lot of support. So let's go over specifically some of the ways in which the organization and patients would be affected. So first and foremost, Planned Parenthood would lose its federal funding. Now, the organization normally receives $450 million from the federal government through Medicaid reimbursements. Specifically, Trump has claimed, though, that if and only if Planned Parenthood gets rid of their abortion services, he would keep their federal funding. So unless they get rid of abortion services and preventative services like that, they're going to lose their funding in that regard. Interestingly enough, the Congressional Budget Office also evaluated Trump Care and said that 400,000 women stand to lose access to care if Trump Care does in fact pass. In addition, the CBO says that cutting Planned Parenthood would increase births and result in additional births, and therefore that would affect the country monetarily, because for the year 2017, Medicaid costs would go up $21 million, and then for over the next 10 years, it would increase by $77 million. In regards to the people who would be affected the most through Trump Care and defunding Planned Parenthood, the low-income population would stand to experience a reduce in access to care and coverage, because specifically healthcare practitioners who don't serve or practice on the low-income population, they would no longer be able to receive that care and that aid. And then finally, the CBO says that defunding Planned Parenthood could potentially save $178 million, but people are concerned whether or not that they would lose more in the long run because of the effects of the defunding than actually saving more money. So talking to people about this issue and discussing, what Trump Care has a potential effect on if Planned Parenthood is cut, a lot of students here who go to USC Engelman Center to get maybe birth control pills or even get access to see women or female doctors, they feel that it's very difficult and very hard to do that. So a lot of them turn to Planned Parenthood to get access to stuff like birth control. And so if the Planned Parenthood right behind me, let's say, is to get defunded or closed down because of Trump Care, where would these female students in particular get access to their birth control? Would they even have access to birth control at all and other preventative and contraceptive services of that nature? So there is a lot at stake for people and for Planned Parenthood if it does get defunded and if Trump Care does pass nationally and here locally in Los Angeles. So in downtown Los Angeles, JTRSA, back to you, Mark.
Thanks so much, JT. Now, how people get health care and pay for it is different in countries all around the world. Joining me now are two international students, Jack Hubner from Canada and Sophia Bosch from Spain. So, Jack, I want to start with you. Canada has universal health coverage, where everybody in the country is required to have health insurance and is given health insurance. How is it like living in a country like that?
Well, it kind of just makes healthcare, I feel like, less of an active process. Most of the time with Canadians, we just end up just getting healthcare whenever we need it, and we don't really have to think about insurance or too much. Before I decided I wanted to go into medicine, I personally didn't know too much about the Canadian healthcare system. Maybe one or two of the drawbacks is that sometimes you have wait times when it's not an emergency. I've had an elective surgery before where it got pushed back and I had to wait around in the hospital for quite a long time. But at the end of the day, they ended up finishing the surgery. That probably wouldn't have happened if it was in a U.S. system, but it's definitely less active.
Right. And Sophia, in Spain, it's a constitutional mandate that everybody has to have health insurance and is given free health insurance. What's it like in Spain?
So while it is very positive and it's one of those things that you don't have to think about, the interpersonal relationships or connections between the patients and the doctors are not as close. It's kind of just another face coming through the doctor's office. The other problem that the system tends to have is that the revenue that's collected from taxes often does not balance out with the cost of the surgeries. So sometimes it doesn't even cover completely or comprehensively the surgeries, and you still have to pay.
And Jack was saying that there's often long wait times. Is that something that also happens in Spain?
Definitely. I think that when you do have this commercialized healthcare, it's just less personal and less privatized. So
now, Jack, you want to go into medicine. You came to school here in the United States and are from Canada. What are Canadians' views of the American healthcare system? I guess now looking at what Trump Care could be and before looking at what the Affordable Care Act was.
Well, I would say that Canadians generally view their own healthcare system very positively. So a lot of the time, you know, they would think that their system is superior to the American system. I mean, but at the same time, there are Canadians that come down actually to the U.S. system if they want to get certain specialty surgeries. So there's a divide a little bit between ones that are super proud of what the Canadian healthcare system is and ones that are, I guess, jealous of all the private care access that the U.S. has.
Is that kind of similar to how Spaniards view the American healthcare system?
I think so. I think that there are definitely pros and cons to both sides of the system.
Right. Well, Jack and Sophia, thank you so much for coming in to speak with us today about healthcare in your respective countries. And now we want to send it back over to Madison, who was looking at how social media reacted to the healthcare debate. Madison, what have you found out?
Thank you, Mark. Definitely another big day on Twitter as people have been protesting and tweeting all around the country. The LA Times has tweeted out today this photo showing the protests in downtown LA, saying that this is how LA has responded to the possible Obamacare repeal. To give you an idea of what that looked like today in downtown, there's a video here, which although I don't believe will have sound, they were chanting, "They don't have the votes," just outside LA City Hall. Here you can see the sheer number of people in the streets in downtown, and here's an aerial shot just to give you an idea as they were marching around City Hall building in LA. Although, like I said, these protests and this was happening all around the country today, even outside Speaker Paul Ryan's office, as people showed up with Bibles to pray for people who'd be affected by the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And we'll take you to Washington, D.C. here for this little video that another user tweeted out showing the protests happening right outside the White House. So like I said, big day on Twitter. I imagine it'll be another big day tomorrow after the vote comes out. Over to you, Mark.
Now, the new health care proposals would have a big impact on college students, regardless of whether they are on their parents' plan or on their own. We talked to some students to find out their biggest concerns.
It in no way will cover costs of insurance, and they haven't actually made competitive insurance vendors across state lines an actually workable program. So the way that that's heading is not great.
I am concerned about how healthcare is going to progress for the millennial generation. In terms of my parents, I know they have Social Security. I think they're going to be okay. But like how healthcare is going to be shaped in the future for when all of us are like 26 years old, we don't know how much our premiums are going to cost because healthcare bills in general are just so up in the air right now that it's just a lot of confusion.
So the bottom line tonight and the biggest headline heading into tomorrow, the House Republicans will bring to a vote tomorrow on the House a bill that could reform healthcare.
And like I said, I imagine we will see a lot of reactions, a lot of responses on both sides of the debate, no matter which way that turns out.
Exactly. Thanks for watching See It Live from everyone at Annenberg Media. I'm Mark Salinger.
And I'm Madison Weil. You can catch us on the web at uscannenbergmedia.com.